agus chola seoirse a bheith mar bhaile again le linn uachtaránach na hÉireann air on AE. You're all very welcome here today. My name is Sinead O'Donnell. I'm the Director of Press for the Presidency. I'm going to introduce a short video and then we'll follow that with remarks from Taoiseach, Taoiseach, Minister McEntee, Minister Byrne and Minister Canny. Thank you.
Shine like an arc light, sing like a bird might sing. When he was higher than heaven, higher than every other thing. Shine like an arc light, like I want you to shine. Oh, I know that you've nobody, and I know that you're not mine. You don't have to know the words, and you don't have to know the rules. You just shine in the morning like the sun, burn like a candle in the night. Shine like a book that's never been read, burn like a saint who knows he's right. Shine like a shard of glass on the first ground. When you shine, you know you burn it down. But I don't wear no chains, I've got no cross to bear, and I'm as free as the wind, I am as free as the air, I am as free as the old, I am as cold as the dawn, and I'm as lost as you are. You are my only law. You don't have to know the words, and you don't have to know the rules. You just shine in the morning like the sun, burn like a candle in the night. Shine like a book that's never been read, burn like a saint who knows he's right. Shine like a shard of glass on the first ground. When you shine, you know you burn me. Shine in the morning like the sun, burn like a candle in the night. Shine like a book that's never been read, burn like a saint who knows he's right. Shine like
Ministers, would you like to?
Taoiseach.
Díomh agus tá fíor áthas orm a bheithin seo gasláán bhaile átha cléab chun an clár tosíochtaí agus beartais a sheoladh le haghaidh uachtaránach na hÉireann ar chomhairle an Aontais Eorpaigh. As seo go ceann sé bhí beidh éire ag obair I lú chóir le gach báil stát den Aontais Eorpach agus muid ag saothrú in Éondaí chun aghaidh go chóirt ar na dúchláin atá roimh an Aontais Eorpach agus chun feabhsathe cearta a bhaint amach do héal or Saránach. In 3 weeks' time, on the 1st of July, Ireland will begin its 8th presidency of the Council of the European Union. It is an honour and a privilege to lead work on behalf of the 450 million people who call the European Union their home. As a country, we are rightly proud of our contribution to significant European Union milestones during our previous presidencies. Our commitment to a successful presidency in 2026 is set out in our programme for government. It is a significant undertaking in terms of both policy development and logistical planning. The work we do as the Irish presidency is not abstract, but it is directly relevant to people's lives and brings tangible benefits. Success requires a whole of government effort to deliver on behalf of citizens right across the European Union. We take on this important role at a critical time for Europe. The geopolitical context is complex and challenging, and the rules-based international order is under pressure. War in Ukraine and in the Middle East is wreaking devastation and heartbreak. Across Europe, households and businesses are faced with very high energy costs. Our priorities for our term in office reflect our assessment of what Europe needs to do in the 6 months ahead. We will prioritise work to enhance the competitiveness of Europe's economy, safeguard the fundamental values of our Union at home and abroad, and provide for the security of our citizens. These three core themes, competitiveness, values and security, are closely interlinked and mutually reinforcing. Economic prosperity is what provides the resources for us to achieve our policy ambitions. There is a need for urgent action to enhance Europe's competitiveness and productivity. We must secure an economic future which meets the needs and expectations of Europe's citizens. We will work to deliver on the commitments in the One Europe, One Market roadmap. This roadmap, agreed by the 3 European Union institutions in April, sets out priority actions to simplify regulation, deepen our single market, reduce energy prices, decarbonise and drive the AI and digital transformation for the benefit of all. Delivering on this agenda will be a real priority for the Irish Presidency. We will work closely and cooperatively with Member States, the European Parliament and the Commission to make as much progress as we possibly can. We live in a time of increased threat and conflict, and we need to work harder to protect our citizens, our democracies and our European way of life. We will safeguard the core values on which the European Union is built: freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law and respect for human rights and dignity. We will also work with others to make sure that Europe's children are safe online. We will continue to offer unwavering support to Ukraine, whose people have shown such courage and determination in defending their country. They deserve a just and a lasting peace. We will support those countries that have applied to join the European Union to advance on their path towards membership, helping to ensure greater prosperity and stability in our neighbourhood. We will advance measures that contribute to the strengthening of European security and defence, supporting collaboration to address critical capability gaps and build resilience. We will also seek to secure a solid basis for the future work of the Union through the negotiation of the European Union's next long-term budget, known as the Multiannual Financial Framework. To support our policy agenda, we will host an extensive programme of presidency meetings, with around 270 meetings involving ministers and officials being held across Ireland. The start of our term begins with a special event here in Dublin Castle on the 1st of July and a visit by the College of Commissioners to Cork, during which Government will discuss in detail our policy priorities and plans for delivery. I also look forward to welcoming my counterparts from across Europe to the European Political Communities Summit and the informal meeting of the European Council in Dublin in November. All meetings and events held across the country will showcase the best of Ireland to our European partners. In today's world, the biggest challenges cannot be addressed by individual countries acting alone. And that is why the Irish Presidency will be guided by the Irish proverb, Ní nart go cur le chéile, strength with unity. Our policy agenda for the rest of this year is indeed an ambitious one, but I am confident that we will have the support and cooperation of our fellow member states to deliver on the issues that matter for communities, citizens and businesses across Europe. Good
afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Dublin Castle. With just 21 days to go until Ireland assumes the presidency of the Council of the European Union for the 8th time, today we're here to formally launch our priorities, our work programme in many ways, for the next 6 months. This gives Ireland the privilege, the significant opportunity and responsibility to shape the EU's strategic agenda for the rest of 2026. And I want to take the opportunity today to thank so many across the civil and public service who have worked so hard to get our country to this point of readiness for the next 6 months. The priorities that we're setting out today for Ireland's presidency are focused on those themes of competitiveness, values and security. These represent our best assessment of the key areas on which the Union needs to focus its work and its efforts in the months ahead. We take over the presidency from our colleagues in Cyprus at a time when the global outlook is increasingly uncertain and increasingly volatile. Yet Europe and Ireland enters this period from a position of relative and considerable strength. Ours is an economy underpinned by world-class companies, a highly skilled and educated workforce, and a deep tradition of research and innovation. As Minister for Finance, I will chair the ECOFIN Council, where the Irish presidency will take forward an incredibly ambitious agenda, prioritising the Union's competitiveness, resilience, and fiscal sustainability. The challenge for Europe is to equip ourselves to ensure our economies remain a source of prosperity and opportunity for our people. The challenge for Europe is to make sure we never just become commentators on what happens in other parts of the world, but look at what is within our own control in terms of our economic resilience. And the real measure of Europe's success is not the wealth we create, but the opportunities that we create for European citizens. And it's clear what we need to do. Today, we set out our roadmap for delivery, because our focus will squarely be on delivery. That's why progressing Savings and Investment Union and finalising a Council position on market integration and supervision package will be my primary focus over the coming months. If not now, when, in terms of Europe taking that decision to deepen its capital markets. Every European should be able to benefit from the growth and success of European companies and not just watch it happen from the sidelines. It affects whether a local business can expand, whether a startup can grow, and whether a factory can stay and scale in Europe. When businesses can access funding, they invest, they innovate, and they create jobs. When investment goes elsewhere, opportunities follow that investment there. This agenda must be underpinned by a modern and effective EU budget. The next multi-annual financial framework, the EU's budget for the next 7 years, will be central to ensuring that Europe can achieve its shared priorities, from competitiveness and innovation to the green and digital transitions, as well as to our collective security. With colleagues, I will form a budgetary framework that can respond to these challenges, support private investment, and enable reforms that strengthen Europe's long-term growth potential. The Irish presidency will work to advance these discussions in a constructive and pragmatic way, recognising that a well-targeted EU budget is a key enabler of our broader economic objectives. Achieving agreement on the annual EU budget will also be a key priority. At the same time, we've got to work to continue to strengthen Europe's financial resilience. The development of a digital euro represents a really important step in that direction. A digital euro would complement cash, would safeguard access to central bank money in an increasingly digital economy, and would support innovation in payments across the EU. It has the potential to ensure that our payment system remains secure, remains efficient, and underpinned by European values. The Irish presidency will ensure that competitiveness and growth is embedded across the work of ECOFIN, and priority will be given to advancing current and new competitiveness initiatives, including the simplification agenda. This will include taking forward the work initiated by the Danish presidency to examine the economic consequences of EU legislation. It's clear that our three priority themes of competitiveness, value and security do not stand apart from one another. They are, as the Taoiseach said, interlocking themes that reinforce one another. By working with determination to make progress across many aspects of the Council's agenda, we can ensure that the EU delivers for citizens, for businesses and for communities, and that the European Union is equipped to face the challenges of the future. The detailed policy programme that we have in front of us today is a tangible reminder of the extent of work that we will need to deliver on in just a matter of weeks. The planning is almost over. Implementation and the support of our partners across the other 26 member states, the Commission and the European Parliament is what we now need. And I know as a government, we're determined that our presidency will drive real progress, achieve substantial results, and will leave a positive legacy for Europe and, of course, for the people of this country. Helen.
The EU a cardja is mór an onardom a bheith live aniu, an shot live aniu, chun an ócáid speisialta. Today we are setting out an ambitious agenda for Ireland's presidency of the Council of the European Union. Delivering on that ambition will require hard work and close cooperation with our EU partners. This is work that we, across government, across our departments, across all our teams are ready for. For many people, the EU presidency may seem technical. In reality, it's an opportunity for Ireland to help shape Europe's agenda for 6 months. bringing together countries, chairing discussions, helping to build agreement and driving forward progress on issues that matter to citizens across Europe. All of this comes at a critical moment for Europe. We face significant economic uncertainty, growing security challenges and rapid and technological change. But alongside those challenges are enormous opportunities to strengthen our economy, to accelerate innovation, to deepen cooperation and to build a more secure and prosperous future. Throughout this presidency, Ireland has the opportunity to help shape Europe's response and to help realise that potential. The scale of our ambition is reflected across the core pillars of our agenda: competitiveness, values and, of course, security. Through the presidency, I am determined, as we all are, to demonstrate how the work of the Union matters to people in their everyday lives. Personally, I've only ever known Ireland as a member of the European Union, and that is true for many people. I am Irish, but I'm also European. And like many others, I've benefited enormously from what the European Union has achieved over many decades. The opportunities to live, to study, to work, to travel across Europe, the peace and stability that European cooperation has helped to underpin, and the economic opportunities created through membership. There are many things that many of us might often take for granted. And so a successful presidency, it's about two things. It's about making real progress on important legislative files, on policy priorities, ones that will help shape Europe's future. But it's also about making sure that people understand that those decisions in practice affect their day-to-day lives. And so through our agenda on competitiveness, we will strengthen the single market, we will remove barriers to internal trade within the EU, we'll help European businesses to expand across the continent to help access their finance that will allow them to grow. A key part of that discussion will be the multi-annual financial framework, or the EU budget. This budget underpins so much of what Europe is able to achieve. Ensuring that Europe has the resources to meet these ambitions will be central to our work. At its heart, this is about jobs, it's about growth, and it's about creating opportunities. We want Europe to remain a place where business can invest, innovate and compete successfully, creating prosperity for people right across the Union. We will pursue an ambitious agenda relating to external trade, one that I look forward to advancing in my role as chair of the meetings of EU trade ministers. I will work with the Commission to conclude our trade agreements with India, with Indonesia, with Australia, to diversify our markets, looking at new trade negotiations with important partners such as Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand and the United Arab Emirates. We will also seek to build an ambitious EU-US trade and investment relationship, one which benefits us both. Through our focus on values, we will ensure that we uphold fundamental rights, that we focus on those most in need of our protection, and we will continue to work closely with those who wish to join and to contribute to our union. We will work to protect our children. Our presidency will place a strong focus on ensuring that the online world is a space that is safe and healthy for children, taking forward work to enhance the safety of children online. We will emphasise the importance of the EU's global role, its contribution to the United Nations, its support for multilateralism, and we will ensure that it uses its voice and influence to defend the international legal order, human rights, democracy and the rule of law. In the area of security, we know that no country acting alone can address the entirety of existing and emerging security challenges. And as Minister for Defence, I am determined that we will contribute actively to the ongoing development of the EU's security and defence. Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine has undoubtedly transformed the security landscape in Europe, and so we will ensure continued absolute support for Ukraine, while also addressing the vulnerabilities that all EU member states, including Ireland, must confront. We will support cooperation to address critical capability gaps, to build resilience, including in the face of hybrid threats, and we will work to address maritime security challenges to ensure the security of our critical infrastructure. This will remain a key focus and priority. The Irish Presidency will promote active engagement in support of lasting peace and security in the Middle East, in particular the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, reaffirming the EU's commitment to the two-state solution. This is a presidency for the whole country. And so, as well as ensuring that the EU presidency meetings and events take place right across the country, we've announced initiatives like the EU presidency county pairings, which gives all counties an opportunity to engage directly with member states. And we we will publish a version of our presidency priorities for children so that this is relatable to all ages. Building on the work done by Cyprus over the last 6 months, we look forward to an Irish presidency which achieves real progress on issues that matter to Irish people, to Irish citizens and European citizens alike. And we will be guided by one simple principle: Níneart go cur le céile. There is nothing of strength without unity.
Thomas.
On the 1st of July, Taoiseach, Ireland will take the lead in delivering a policy agenda that delivers for Europe, but for our people into the future. The priorities and policy objectives that we have set out today have been developed through a process of broad consultation, both with our European partners and right here at home. The Irish EU presidency will be focused on the areas in which people see the greatest value in EU action: action to advance our shared interests, and action to respond to the needs of citizens and businesses across Europe. In developing our objectives, the Government has consulted extensively with our partners across the European Union, and I have visited the majority of EU capitals to discuss their priorities. But here at home, over the last year, I have met with community and voluntary representatives, I've met with trade unions, I've met with business representatives, I've visited schools and universities to learn their priorities for the EU agenda. And I know that other ministers have had similar discussions about policy in their areas of responsibility. It's been a particular pleasure for me to engage in community visits focused on our EU presidency, and to hear the voices of people in communities and what they want to see achieved from the 1st of July. And as part of this, I also visited Belfast to engage people in Northern Ireland. We also launched an open call for public submissions on the development of our presidency priorities last November, and we received a total of 484 responses from individuals and groups across Ireland and further afield. And that's the first time we've done that for a presidency, and it's certainly one of the first times it's been done for any presidency. I want to thank everyone who took the time to contribute to this process, whether through stakeholder meetings or preparing a written submission. Tá an tuachtaránach seo Harbh tábhachtach mar a sin céad uachtaránacht éireannach ó rinne teanga oibre lán aimimiúil san Aontas Eorpach don Gaeilge I mí anóir fé Cloc bhíle thúntasach a seaí ranfartíocht teanga agus cultúrtha na hÉireann leis an Aontas Eorpach, agus chuireann deis fáil ná raibh a lehéad an riomh hena ról na Gaeilge in gnóthaí an Aontas Eorpach a léirú. Le linn na huachtaránachta, baimidig cóthathú na Gaeilge in gnóthaí na Comhairle, agus ag úsáid na teanga le haidh cumarsáide ofigiúla agus imeachtaí cultúrtha, ag taú le úsáid na Gaeilge ar chócéim le teangacha obre eile an Aontas Eorpach. Our EU presidency also offers Ireland an exceptional opportunity to share our culture with our fellow Europeans and further afield, leaning into the dynamism, the originality and the global reach of contemporary Irish arts. Later this month, we'll launch the Irish EU Presidency Culture Programme, and my department will deliver a cultural relations programme featuring events presented by our embassies and consulates across Europe and beyond, and investing in new partnerships and creative collaborations. Ireland approaches our presidency with a genuine sense of responsibility and an ambition to succeed. We've put in the groundwork. We know what we are being asked to do, and we know the moment in which we are being asked to do it. We're committed to doing it well, in the interests of Ireland, in the interests of Europe, and in the interests of our people. Because ultimately, let's not forget that when we're talking about the European Union, we're talking about what belongs to us as citizens. We are Europe, and we are the European Union. Níneart go cur le céile gur magadh.
Thank you. Sean.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Delivering on a successful and effective presidency will be a central objective for all of us in government over the next 6 months. We will take forward our core themes of competitiveness, values and security by driving progress on a wide range of proposals and initiatives across the EU policy agenda. And in a volatile world, we will work as presidency to ensure that the Council responds effectively to the needs of all 27 member states and of our citizens across Europe through the 6 months ahead. My own work during the presidency will focus on Transport Council, where we will be taking forward a number of core objectives. We want to ensure that transport can be a key enabler for boosting EU competitiveness. We will focus on decarbonisation and delivering the just green transition, which is essential to meet the EU decarbonisation goals. We will ensure that transport policy delivers for citizens across the Union with a strong focus on passenger rights and digitalisation. And we will work to build a resilient European transport network that is safe and secure for all transport users. And of course, we will also play a focus on road safety, which must always remain a top priority in the EU. We look forward to welcoming the EU Transport Ministers to Ireland for an informal meeting of the Transport Council in September. This will be one of 22 informal meetings which will be hosted here during our presidency, part of an overall programme of more than 270 presidency meetings and events in Ireland, which we will expect will involve more than 30,000 delegates. Reflecting the commitment we bring in the programme of my government, these meetings will take place in cities and counties around Ireland, ensuring that the entire country benefits from the profile of the presidency brings. Delivering successfully on all aspects of our presidency role will require a significant national effort. But we know we are well prepared. We know we can count on the support and cooperation of our European partners. And we know that over the next 6 months, across our core priorities of competitiveness, values and security, we can make a real and important contribution to the future of the EU, a union which has delivered so much for Ireland in over the 53 years of our membership. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. So we'll take questions. If you just show of hands, whoever wants a question. We'll take a question here from Ciara to start. Do you have the microphone?
Taoiseach, Kaya Callas warned yesterday that Ireland...
Sorry?
Kaya Callas warned yesterday that Ireland, despite being neutral, isn't immune from threats from Russia. And I suppose coming into the presidency and Ireland taking it over, there's been massive security concerns. I suppose, you know, do you believe that we are equipped to handle this? And also, have we outsourced security from any other countries?
We are equipped, and the Gardaí have done a first-class job in a range of areas, in technologies and so on, in terms of ensuring the security. Our defence forces, likewise, no country is immune from modern-day security threats, the main one being cyber security. And on a regular basis, countries and companies now are subject to a variety of cyber attacks, for example. We've taken additional measures in terms of critical undersea infrastructure, which is another area that countries are mindful of, be that gas interconnection, be that subsea cables, be it into the future offshore wind infrastructure. We share experience, we share knowledge with other countries, and I note, as I said, in recent times, both at the EPC meeting in Yerevan, all of that passed off very smoothly. So we need to keep things in perspective also. Sorry? No, I mean, we are Gardaí in our defence forces, but we will work with others. We will collaborate with other countries, as we do all on a habitual and on a regular basis. So on the defence side, our intelligence services work with others in terms of identifying potential risks, sharing knowledge, sharing experience, and so forth. And our Gardaí obviously do likewise, because crime and threats are international by definition.
Okay, so Louise next, and then Sean will follow.
Thank you. Taoiseach, last month the European Parliament's Housing Committee described Ireland's housing crisis as the most severe and most complicated in the European Union. The Irish Examiner did quite a long report on the homelessness crisis recently, and it found that there's been a litany of broken promises and failed policies from the government that has led to homelessness numbers increasing. Is there anything that can be done during this EU presidency to address our homelessness crisis, and do you envisage a situation whereby when this presidency ends on the 31st of December that there will be fewer people in emergency accommodation?
I don't think, let's be very straight and honest with people, the fundamentals of housing policy will be the government's investment in housing and the government programme across the board in terms of policy legislation and investment. That's where the impact on housing will be. I wouldn't accept your presentation, as you put it initially, in the sense that we now have a record number of social houses being built every year. No, sorry, look, I'm not interrupting, just stating a fact. We need balance here and we need perspective. There's more social houses being built per annum now, close to 9,000 in 2025. If you look back 5, 6, 10 years ago, that amount of social housing was not being built. Yes, we need to build more. We built 36,000 houses last year. We'll build more this year, but we need to get to 50,000 per annum on a sustainable basis over a decade. Now, the European Investment Bank, and I've met with them in respect of housing, they are saying it's a European-wide crisis. They're saying every member state has challenges in terms of housing. So it's not just an Irish phenomenon, but we're focused on the Irish. We are hosting a housing summit, and we do want greater European engagement in housing. It won't be in the form, to be honest, of investment, but it could potentially be important in terms of the regulatory environment that governs infrastructure development, that governs housing development. And that whole simplification agenda in terms of the simplification of regulation, we believe is particularly important in terms of unlocking and unblocking barriers to both housing development and infrastructure which can enable housing, and infrastructure for infrastructure's sake in terms of roads, public transport, offshore wind. There will always have to be compromises made, and at times the regulatory framework is overly burdensome and can stymie development. And that's the area where I believe we can, with our European counterparts, perhaps develop a better overall regulatory framework that would enable housing to be built faster.
Okay, Sean.
Taoiseach, firstly, what is the overall cost going to be to the state of hosting the presidency? And secondly, for the people whose only engagement might be snippets they hear on the news, or they hear about the cost or the traffic delays when there's a big summit, why should they care that we're hosting the presidency? Like, in real terms, for the people who get up early in the morning, as you guys often like to refer to, why should they care?
Well, first of all, in terms of the overall costs, range from about 165 million to 185 million, excluding security costs. Every country is obliged to host a presidency, about 13 and a half years. In our case, now every 13 and a half years, given the current membership of the Council. It's interesting, in all of the opinion polls, and I'm not the greatest fan of opinion polls, but park that for one moment, there's overwhelming pro-EU sentiment in terms of those comprehensive Eurobarometer surveys that take place from time to time. And in fact, post-Brexit, that pro-European Union sentiment increased very significantly. So there's a general support amongst the population. And when people travel across Europe, young people in particular participating in Erasmus programs in third level education across Europe, they value it actually in terms of the freedom of the skies, in terms of how the single market transformed air travel, for example, aviation, people's capacity to get from A to B across Europe much more quickly than would have been the case. And there are many, many more good examples of where Europe matters. If you're a farmer, you will be particularly keen on what happens within Europe. In fact, this morning when I met the civil society organisations, those representing farming were up to me immediately in the context of the Common Agricultural Policy, the budget. They feel it's not adequate. They want that to be increased. If you're in research or higher education, you will be particularly focused on our negotiations in the budget also because of the Horizon programme. If you're in business or creating jobs, you'll be very focused on our presidency because the competitiveness agenda and the roadmap there is fairly impactful if we can pull it off. The Capital Markets Union, Banking Union would be significant for small to medium-sized companies in terms of getting access to capital within Europe to grow and to scale. If, for example, the 28 regime, Europe Inc., under the aegis of Commissioner Michael McGrath, if we can deliver that, that's a revolution potentially for SMEs in terms of their establishment to essentially being European SMEs from day one, as opposed to just national SMEs who have to navigate another 26 sort of national barriers and so on like that. So there's a lot actually of meat. It's our job, it's your job as well, to communicate as much as that is possible to our citizens and to people. But I think there will be a lot of interest in it because of those practical impacts that Europe has on people's daily lives.
Okay, there's two questions just in front of Sean. We'll take them together. If we just get a microphone.
Jennifer Duggan with Bloomberg. For Minister McEntee, you mentioned, addressing the critical capability gaps in relation to security. And I'm just wondering, what does that mean in concrete terms? And also, has there been any communications from other EU states with concerns about those capability gaps, particularly in relation to our West Coast and the undersea cables?
So what I mean by that is looking at the new and emerging threats that we've seen over the last number of years, in particular the kinds of hybrid threats, in particular the types of attacks that we've seen in our airspace, most notably through drones, the impact that that's having on economies, on our airspace, but also the potential implications for critical infrastructure underwater, making sure that we are working in a joined-up way. There's 22 member states with coasts. We need to make sure that when we look at our own maritime security strategies, are we joined up? Are we working to share the capabilities and the capacities that we have? Are there gaps and ways in which we need to build on those capabilities? And you'll be aware Ireland just this year published our first National Maritime Security Strategy. What this will do is building on the significant work that's already underway. We have a Defence Force capability that monitors our economic zone 24/7, 7 days a week. However, is there more that we can do to work more closely with international partners? We're obviously developing a new European security strategy. This isn't just looking at defence and security in the traditional sense, it's looking at it from an economic perspective. And so that focus on our critical infrastructure underwater, that focus on cyber security, protecting the ways in which we are interconnected, making sure that our Gardaí are working closely with police forces across the EU. How do we strengthen, whether it's Europol, whether it's our engagement with Interpol or other agencies? All of this work is absolutely essential, and what's important is that Ireland is seen as a driving factor and a driving force. We may be a militarily neutral country, and I think that often is depicted in a way that Ireland is viewed as not being committed to overall security and defence. That couldn't be further from the truth. So what we want to ensure is not just through the Department of Defence and the Defence Council, through the Foreign Affairs Council, through the Economic Councils and through the European Council itself, we are absolutely committed to overall European security, to identifying new and emerging challenges, to working closely to address those challenges and to responding effectively to those risks or challenges as they emerge.
Okay. And then, so the lady beside had a question, and then we'll go to Cormac after.
Yeah, Taoiseach, we can see from the very booklet that we're all have in our hands that it's a hugely ambitious agenda over the next 6 months, and undoubtedly that will impact, I mean, that's a workload for all departments. So undoubtedly that's going to have some sort of impact on the Dáil and domestic schedule. So I just wondered if you could share, has that been modelled out and how that is going to be managed? I mean, are we going to see changes to recesses or anything like that, changes to the schedule or anything?
No, it just means very hard work on all our behalf. Look, there will be, obviously, we'll have to attend meetings and so on, but we envisage, obviously, the Dáil continues on in line with the calendar that has been outlined for the Dáil for the remainder of the year. As you know, that's an annually organised framework governing Dáil and Shannon activities, but it will mean a significant extra workload for ministers of state in particular, and for many of our public servants also, given the scale of meetings and the kind of work behind the scenes, which is the working group meetings to make sure that these files and these agendas around enlargement, for example, with Montenegro, that we can progress that very quickly. In terms of the budget negotiations, you know, we'll have significant work ahead of October to have a negotiating box ready for the council meeting in the autumn. So, yeah, it's going to take a lot of work on public servants and the political leadership of government, but that's what comes. That's what we're elected to do.
See anything falling off the domestic agenda as a result of the high presidency workload?
Well, we have to keep our focus on the domestic agenda too. I mean, it's very important to us that the programme for government gets delivered. We have a budget now. What we are doing, so we've decided to have, and we've had already earlier consultations on the budget, for example, because we know the budget will be delivered in October. So therefore, we're already doing sounding out with our own membership, but also at the government departmental level. We're telling government ministers they will have to have their estimates ready earlier, and that we'll be in a position to deliver the budget with full consensus across government and ministers in as timely a manner as possible. So things like that, yeah, because we're conscious once we certainly hit the autumn, it'll be very intensive.
Okay. Cormac.
I have two issues that I'm hoping to address. Firstly, to Minister McEntee, Hilary Benn, the Northern Secretary, spoke about how he had a phone call with you last night about the situation in the North, and he said that there are questions for the Irish authorities about what they knew about the suspect in the attack that sparked all of the subsequent unrest, and that it may contribute to investigations and the investigation process. What did you tell the Northern Secretary in response, and will Ireland cooperate with investigations?
Well, firstly, I spoke late last night with Secretary of State Hilary Benn, and the engagement was for me to convey my absolute horror at the vicious attack that took place on Monday night, and obviously that's the subject of an investigation now, which we all welcome, but also to express my significant concern at the violence we saw erupt last night on the streets. It is important for all of us, not just political representatives and those in Northern Ireland and the UK, but I think on this island, to call for calm, to call for restraint, and to call for people to really think about what it is they're doing here. There should be no justification for any acts of violence of this kind, in particular where individuals, for families and communities are singled out. This is not something that we can accept within any of our communities. I'm obviously aware that discussions have been raised around the common travel area. What I'd say is that this is something that we have enjoyed between both islands for many years, and it has contributed to both on an economic and a social perspective growing prosperity, but obviously any discussions or any specific issues when it comes to the individual at hand, I'm very aware that the Minister for Justice will be speaking directly to Minister Benn, Secretary of State, later on this afternoon.
Will there be cooperation with the investigation in the North if it's asked for from the Irish Government and the Irish authorities?
Absolutely, I have no doubt there will be, but again, I'm aware that Minister O'Callaghan will be speaking directly to Secretary of State Hilary Benn later on today.
And to the Taoiseach, and I'm hoping to get the views of Simon Harris for Fine Gael and Sean Canny for the Independents in Government on this as well. The document here about setting out Ireland's presidency talks about continuing to pressure Russia to end its illegal and justified war of aggression, including via robust sanctions. I'd just like to get the view from each of you as whether those sanctions should include alumina, given the link between alumina produced in County Limerick and August alumina and the supply chain for the Russian military.
Yeah, could I just say in the first instance that the key to UK-Irish relationships in terms of the migration is, first of all, engagement between the two governments, and we discussed this at the Anglo-Irish Summit in February last in Cork, and the need for ongoing engagement between the Home Secretary and our Minister for Justice. That is important. And secondly, comprehensive coordination between police forces, between the Garda Síochána and the PSNI in this instance. And thirdly, clear assertion of the principle that the common travel area works for citizens in the United Kingdom and for Irish citizens. It's a benefit. Others may abuse the common travel area, and it's primarily a framework for citizens. So there are issues both ways that we can only really address by proper engagement between the two governments, and in particular between the Home Secretary and the Minister for Justice. In terms of sanctions, primarily the Commission proposes sanctions. It's a European competence. They do work with Member States, obviously, in respect of those sanctions, and we've had numerous, probably the most severe sanctions yet emanating from the European Union in the context of a war and a conflict, and it's in respect of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And up to now, the European Union has decided not to have alumina on the sanctions list. And there is a wider potential European issue here. We do need to get the full facts, and we need to examine this both in an Irish context, but also in a more European-wide context. And the potential interdependence between that facility and needs within Europe has to be fully bottomed out. We do not in any way want to be either indirectly or through some of this material aiding or supporting Russia's military atrocities against the Ukrainian people. But we do need to bottom out the facts, and the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment is working on that right now, and hopefully within the next 2 weeks we'll be in a position to present a report to government But we then will work with the Commission, because there is a facility there, by the way. And so there's a number of issues that we've got to work through without just taking an immediate sort of reactionary kind of step to this. It is an important issue. It's a very serious issue. We're taking it seriously, and we're going to deal with it comprehensively.
Yeah, can I say that you'll be pleased to know there's one government position in relation to this, and that is that the Government of Ireland and the people of Ireland stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. Sanctions work. They work because it hits Putin where it hurts in terms of an impact on the Russian economy, and Ireland has been to the forefront of supporting every sanctions package to date. I've consistently said we can never cherry pick when it comes to sanctions. There's a criteria that needs to be applied by the European Commission in making its recommendation to member states. And Ireland will always be supporting sanction packages when they come forward, and indeed I'd expect there'll be further sanction packages in the time ahead. I do think there is a need, as Atisha correctly says, to establish all of the facts here as quickly as possible. In the past, I know the issues around that plant have been examined to the satisfaction of, I think, the US authorities and European authorities. New information has come to light. That information can't be dismissed or overlooked. It needs to be robustly investigated in a timely manner. And I know from speaking to our colleague, Minister Peter Burke, that work is progressing at speed, and I expect it will be concluded in less than 2 weeks' time, and that will enable us to have the factual position.
If there is a proposal to include aluminum in a future sanctions package, will Ireland support it?
I think we have to be very careful we allow the investigation to do its work, but it's very clear Ireland will not support any measures that help assist Putin's war machine. The question here is to establish the facts, and there's also significant issues around the concealment of supply chains. So I think the actions being taken by the Department of Enterprise are appropriate. It's then for the Commission, who, by the way, this isn't being done by Ireland in isolation. The Commission have been in very close contact with the Department of Enterprise, establish the facts, feed those facts into the Commission, and then allow them to be analysed.
I agree with that, and I think it's important that we wait the outcome of the investigation. We treat it very seriously in government. The government's position has been stated here quite clearly, and we'll continue to work together to get to the right decision at the end of the day.
Okay, Dominic and Faker. We're running out of time, so we'll take one more after this.
Gurmagov, a hísigh hí Kaya Callison sa hné kaint chohocrú trádála an Seorpaig le Israel. Nis hasí sé rá nachhfuil nachhfuil mórmh suntacha na chuir sin fiún rí mar atá éileh an rialtas. Amach sib sé nó an dóileat gúil deis níos fearr is a sog ceann sé bhí le linghuachtaránachta brúchar nó éileh hirtha eile agus tíortha eile beidir a bhela chuig an teasamh céanna san habh sé.
Well, dúspar an tachtain se chuing mar zóla beag an be crunú going ag an gcóirle agus beag an ábhar seo an dámla agus díras Antonio Costa an ábhar a chuir óscór an chóirle. Ach mar aonla sin de bhíosa caint le Kaya Callis in faoin geis agus faoin feic agus má thuirm sé agus an rud a bhí á phlé going ná an gahamíd fannach goí go méid mór a going. Stacker áiltamach in an nadála an meoch mór a good nó nach meoch breithin sé ar riine ach is an I má thuirm sé an cheist a chuir rih an chóirla. Agus seasamh a thógan den is féle tíre éagsúla seasamh a thógan ar an gceist. Agus dochreid a má thuirm nach bhfuil éonhar ag tarlú model le conra is bhilí ópach an choras an conra tradála sin mar is léir de chách nach bhfuil Israel á cholíne a dúlgasí atá leistigh den gonra sin. Agus an méadtá ag tarlú in Gaza and some West Bank agus in Lebanon sú fásach ar fada is tá sé dochreite ar lí an méadtá ag tarlú an agus caiig I mórm se éantas na hórapcha seasamh suas agus rudí dhéanamh faoi. Sin mórm héana is, yeah.
Okay, Faker, and then we'll finish up with Ashley after that.
Sure. Two questions. Firstly, for the Taoiseach, notwithstanding your priorities, which you've pointed out a number of times in the past hour or so, I guess some people may have some concerns that the coming months and Ireland's EU presidency could be overshadowed by what's happening with Ohanish Illumina and what's happening in the Middle East and what's happening even, you heard in Dáil today, in terms of Ireland's upcoming game against Israel. So do you feel that those concerns could overshadow the EU presidency of Ireland? And then secondly, for the Taoiseach, you'll have heard today the Irish Fiscal Advisory Council has criticised governments, what it feels is government's change in position by the fact that we're having to borrow some 30 billion euro by the end of the decade to fund the Rainy Day Fund.
Could I say I'm not concerned about that? I mean, there will always be issues. And in fact, we've outlined our programme, but we're very conscious that the Irish presidency is taking place in a very geopolitically uncertain world. And there are many challenges. There's a world of excessive conflict. Like one of the discussions I had with the Pope really was about this. I mean, it's quite fundamental to everything we do now. The amount of war and conflict is undermining democracy, undermining economy, undermining society, undermining human dignity. It's incredible from Sudan, across the Middle East, into Ukraine and many other conflicts. The almost casual way that human life is being extinguished, the number of killings and murder and mayhem from the conduct of these wars. So we're conscious that's the backdrop that we're entering into the presidency. But in terms of the specific issues, there will be issues will emerge during the presidency. Our challenge and what we have to do is to keep the focus on the agenda, not to get distracted by other events. Because one of the positives about our presidency is that the three institutions, the Parliament, the Commission and the Council, have agreed on the competitiveness agenda, have a clear agreed roadmap. So there are clear files, there are clear issues around the Savings and Investment Union, the Industrial Accelerator Act, the simplification of regulation, the deepening of the single market. So it's really clear. So it's within our capacities, once we keep our eye on the ball, to keep relentless focus on getting the job done. In terms of enlargement, we believe we can give it a really good shot of getting Montenegro very close to the end line by the end of the year. That we would essentially have most of their, if not all of their chapters closed, which then puts it up to the EU. Here's the state that's ready to join. Are we now going to enable it? So if we keep the focus right, and on security and defence there are the key milestones as well, and on values, with the new government in Hungary and so on, we have a fair wind in that side of it within the European Union. So there will always be issues that will take our attention. I've been on the EU Council since 2020, and at different times, in fact, one of the defining features of it has been the fact that a conflict or a major event from a pandemic to wars emerge, and we have to react and deal with it. And that it will fall to us to be a party to the leadership in such issues.
Yeah, and look, I welcome the role of the Irish Fiscal Advisory Council. I think it's the one body in this country that doesn't ask me to spend more money. So every time I go into the Dáil, everybody seems to think, is there anything to be said for another budget on a weekly basis? So it is very useful that we established a body that does actually add a degree of balance to the conversation. And that balance is important because public expenditure has increased at a very rapid rate in Ireland over the last number of years. There's many reasons for that, there's many good reasons for that, but it is true. And we are getting to the point in Ireland where, alongside a question about additionality, there also has to be a very important question about impact and delivery for our citizens. And I know both myself and Minister Chambers, the Taoiseach and I, and all of the government are united in relation to that. So IFAC have an important role to play. In fairness to them, they'd also, obviously they make certain comments that generate more coverage than others, but they did also talk about the relative strength of the Irish economy. They did talk about the low borrowing costs that our country faces as well. How much may need to be borrowed in relation to what I would not categorise at all as a rainy day fund, but actually funds for infrastructure and demographic pressures, depends very much on the level of taxation that this country takes in. We've seen, obviously, we're profiling a larger surplus now than we had expected at the start of the year. And I'd make two final points. I mean, capital spending is different, and borrowing for capital spending can be a good thing. And the second point I'd make is capital spending shouldn't just be seen as spending, it is an investment. We're talking about the European presidency. It's a statement of fact that Ireland's level of public infrastructure is about 25 to 30% behind the EU average. So in terms of pressure points that we have in our economy, that will require significant investment, and that's why we have these two funds set up, and it's why we have an ambitious national development plan. And finally, and one of the things I know the Fiscal Advisory Council were seeking for a long time, is the idea of a multi-annual approach to budgeting. And we now have a multi-annual financial framework. We've submitted it to Europe. It's been approved by ECOFIN. And what we're saying very clearly is we will live within that. That is the level of spending that we believe will be required to meet the economic and societal requirements of the country. And I think that provides a degree of surety that may not have always been there in the past.
Okay, and finally, Ashley.
Taoiseach, you mentioned in your opening remarks about online safety being a priority, but the public have kind of heard mixed messages from this government on what exactly that means, particularly in relation to children. Is it a ban you want for under 16s? Is it more age verification? Will we move ourselves? Will we move only with Europe? So exactly what can the public expect in terms of progress for online safety in terms of children and teenagers by the end of this presidency?
Well, I think fundamentally far greater protection for children online, and yes, age verification will be a key factor of that. We are working with other European countries in terms of the concept of an outright ban, but I'm minded also to continue to engage, because I think the Oireachtas committee did a very well researched piece of work, and I listened intently to what was said and what the chair and Alan Kelly said on that, and I'm always open to research and an evidence-based approach. But fundamentally, we have to protect our children. It is a significant public health challenge to young people's health and to children's health in particular. And we took measures last year, just before the last general election, in terms of pouches in schools, which was lampooned by some of the opposition, but actually has had impact in terms of giving that window, that space to children in the classroom and in schools, improving their concentration, their focus, but also their capacity to enjoy life. And I heard from some teachers that for the first time in a long time they heard children making noise in the corridor again. Kind of incredible that that's what's been happening. I think all of us in the media world and in the political world should take a leaf out of that book and put the mobile phones away every now and again. It certainly would be healthier politically as well.
And Taoiseach, just on the wider question of tech regulation, obviously Ireland is the EU headquarters for many of these companies, and Europe wants to move for more regulation. And for example, Meta have raised serious concerns, they're saying, with the Digital Fairness Act, for example. So does that create a tension between what the EU want to do in terms of more regulations on these tech companies and what may not be in the Irish interest, because they're all based here?
Well, on the other hand, though, I mean, the tech companies do argue that there's too much regulation in Europe. This is a refrain we hear. On the other hand, though, they've been pretty successful in Europe, and they've been pretty successful in the European single market. In fact, one of the complaints within Europe under the competitiveness agenda, if you look at Letta and Draghi, is we don't have any trillion-dollar digital companies in Europe. So, there's a bit of balance needed in the debate. However, I do acknowledge one where I do agree with some of the technology sector is we do need to pivot more to innovation in Europe. And it's always a balance. Enforcement is important. But certainly in the AI world, there is an argument that we need to pivot more to innovation. US and China are well ahead of Europe in that respect. So it's all, but we do have fairly significant now regulatory frameworks in place at European Union level. I've never accepted the argument about the tension between the fact that we're hosting companies here, because our Data Protection Commission, I think, has been very effective. There was a bit of blackguarding with that in the beginning, people trying to undermine it. I think it showed its capacities over the last number of years. So I don't buy that argument all of the time. And we're just as good at regulating as anybody else.
Will there be a ban on social media for under 16s over the next 6 months? Your answer is still a bit unclear.
Well, I mean, over the next 6 months is a very challenging timeline. I can't give you that guarantee, but certainly we hope to advance it. Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you.